Travis, back with TechRaptor, GenCon 2015. I'm here with Adam Poots, creator of Kingdom Death Monster, hotly anticipated game that was kickstarted a while back. Known for its minis, they're actually showing off gameplay now here at GenCon.
So Kingdom Death is my vision of a nightmare horror world in which you'll get together with your friends and die a lot.
So obviously, what people notice first is the minis. So is this game all about just fighting the monsters, or is there more to it?
I mean, if I were to describe this in nerd language, it would be a hybrid tabletop RPG that's self-running. So you don't need a DM or storyteller to sort of, put the game together for you. And this comes from, a very early need for me as a gamer and having a very big gaming group and no one ever wanting to be a DM. So we ended up only sort of settling on things that were cooperative. And I just wanted a deeper experience from that sort of stuff. And that was like the seed for what eventually blossomed into this enormous game.
As the Kickstarter grew bigger and bigger, you've obviously packed more and more into the box until it's it rivals the old Fantasy Flight coffin boxes, although I think it probably puts those to shame. This being a passion project, did you feel obligated to the people that kickstarted and believed in you?
Absolutely, without a doubt. When you're in a situation where you put your vision and your creative energy into something, and then it's met with just so much enthusiasm by first your very small amount of original fans, people who are just collecting our resins, and then outwards to just for me, mass, because of the detail we put into the plastic and the manufacturer we chose, which is by far an extremely high quality standard, we ended up with these very long delays, and I just felt that the best thing we could do to sort of show all these people that we're serious about putting this together and doing good by them was to just continue to polish and add more artwork and to make sure the gameplay was as refined as we can possibly get it. And that ended up being just a tremendous amount more work and then more expense.
So before the game came to fruition, you were known for making super high quality minis.
Yeah.
So was the impetus behind the game based on the minis, or did you make the minis with the idea of being able to create the game from there?
The super high quality miniatures was a little bit of an accident. When I started this, I desperately wanted to make a game, and breaking into the market and finding sculptors was very difficult as someone who knew nothing. And one of the first people I found was a digital sculptor who was willing to work with me. And neither of us had any idea that we could get something 3D printed at that point, but I knew it was probably possible. So once we had the model, we looked to get it 3D printed, and I, did my research and my homework and finally got something that looked good. And because his scale was more realistic, the model ended up being extremely finely detailed. So we cast it in resin, opened it up to the market directly through us, and at that time, just Cool Mini or Not, and we sold our 100 copies, and it sort of set the standard. And people were really into it. And from there, the quality level of that model started to attract other sculptors. They thought, you guys are doing something very different, something very classy. We want to be involved. And then, as soon as you see something and you really like it, you just start to chase it. And just as we kept producing more and more miniatures, just this constant quest of how can we make it better? What did we learn from the last one we did? What production problems did we have? What particular techniques ended up looking better? And it just very much became a quest leading into trying to make some really, really gorgeous stuff, because that was selling and helping us, keep going. And then when it came to the actual game, at that point, our fan base had known us for doing that. And so, just immediately and very easily carried over into it. So we thought, if we have all these gorgeous minis, we absolutely have to make a game that matches that. Not just on the surface level either. We wanted to make sure the whole experience was as thought out and as effortful as each little detail we put into these, tiny men, as I call them.
So is the game played over the course of a campaign?
Yep, the game is absolutely played over the course of a campaign. We're hoping in the future, once the game is out in the hands of people, having more one-shots and challenge scenarios and little micro-hunts. But the core game and the experience we wanted to deliver to people was absolutely this totally immersive experience. And from a design philosophy standpoint, we very much wanted to be a story about show and not tell. Growing up, I've read a tremendous amount of fantasy literature, and I love it. But at the same time, And not necessarily that I wanted to approach it differently, but I like that often sometimes the best things are the things you know the least about. It's very much a less is more sort of like style of presentation. So you'll begin this campaign and you begin the game just as you would if you bought the box, hopefully with 4 friends, and you know nothing about it. And the game starts with 4 survivors waking up in darkness, a lantern, and nothing. And the intro story in the book is the exact same one that we presented during the Kickstarter video. So people who are familiar with that will instantly, hopefully, start to connect to it. And that leads right into your first fight with the monster and the game's tutorial. And by the time you finish that, you've already established that you've reached your first year in this campaign, and you're ready to start spending some of the resources you earned on upgrading your settlements and establishing a foothold in this terrible world.
So how much of the campaign is the settlement phase versus fighting monsters to get resources? Is it just, like you said, show don't tell, and people don't have very much information, or is it something that's going to be fleshed out over the course?
In the beginning, it's absolutely, at least the first few years of the campaign, is going to be mostly taking place in the showdown, because that's the meat of the game. But as you continue to develop your settlement and your population swells, also your number of options just increases dramatically. And that, you start to sit down with your friends, and since it's fully cooperative, you start thinking, okay, now we have some hard decisions. We can see in our timeline here that year 5, we're going to have a nemesis encounter. Maybe you're playing legit and you decide not to look ahead, so you just know it's coming, right? So how are we going to prepare to handle this threat? Are we going to hunt the same monster and try to finish an armor set out? Are we going to develop our civilization and innovate and hopefully get a car that will power us up? Or are we going to, chase down some more powerful weapons to get prepared for this battle? So definitely as the game continues, the settlement phase becomes as important, and sometimes honestly takes a little bit longer in the showdown. Especially if you have a friend who just can't decide what they want to do, and you end up going come on.
So does the game have fail states if you don't prepare properly, or is it just kind of, oh, bummer, we'll get them next time?
It's brutal. If you lose, it's very much a slippery slope. The game is very much kind of like an old school video game where you are taught through failure. So if you go out to hunt something, or say the butcher shows up, the first nemesis, and you just wipe to him and lose 4 people, that's 4 people from your population gone forever. There's no resurrection, no one's coming back. You get to keep your gear and whatever, innovations like technology your settlement has. But sometimes that loss of 4 people could bring you to a critical state where you have very few people left in your settlement. And then you can say, are we going to play this out and keep going? Or are we just going to, fold our hands and try a new strategy and start from the beginning? And that was very deliberate. We want to get to a place where people are comfortable replaying the campaign, especially since once you start to add the expansions into the mix. Most expansions, when you add it to your timeline, will have a specific year that they fire off on. So it's very much a system of picking which monsters you want in this sort of overarched experience and then running through it.
For people interested in getting just the base game, how much gameplay could they expect on a successful campaign run?
So the end of the game, it all culminates in year 20. You get to the point where you can end the game. You can have the encounter with the final monster from that point whenever you're ready. So we basically give you sort of like an end game point where you have 5 years to fully prepare yourself, or you could just dive in. Your first couple of years in the game, probably an hour or 2 to gameplay in total for a full cycle of showdown, settlement phase, and then hunting a new monster. As it goes on, this increases a little bit until I'd say the level 3 hunts that you'll be doing towards the end of the game can be very dramatic. You could walk into a level 3 Phoenix and just totally blow it, in which case, it's like a 30-minute night. But it could also turn into a very protracted, very interesting battle. Maybe the showdown takes a full 2.5, and then once you have your spoils, it takes you a little while to decide what you want to do with that.
And that's assuming that people are successful in maintaining their campaign
if they're
from the start.
successful, our playtesters, because we had so many playtesters who came in and we just had them run the whole campaign. And it took 2 guys playing the campaign, each controlling a pair of survivors, about a month a month of full work time to get to the game. That's 40 hours a week, which is intense. You know, granted, there's a lot of like check-ins with us and making sure that we're getting the testing data we need, but it's a big game.
So, what percentage of campaigns do you think end in brutal failure?
Oh, I'd say, what, 66%, right? Usually it's on your third shot. You're like, okay, it's going. We got this going.
So 66% failure rate seems pretty high.
Yeah.
So are you specifically targeting people that like that much challenge, people that might like roguelike video games that have permadeath, that have instant fail states, etc.? Or is this something that just came out of what you wanted to always play in a game?
It's definitely personal.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love games and I love playing games with friends, but I'm not mentally challenged unless there's actually a challenge. And, you know, sometimes a beer and pretzels game with your friends is great, but a game like this, especially if you're really pushing it, you need to be careful. And every one of your little choices, even though they seem insignificant, can add up tremendously. It's very strange. It's not like a typical video game where dodge left or dodge left, right, is the only thing that really matters, right? Pump your strength all the way, kill things as fast as possible. In this, there's just so many little things that you decide, and they seem inconsequential. And then before you know it, it's added up. Usually, you know, as you said, 66% of the time failure. But sometimes when you've got it right, it's just very satisfying. You know, the first monster in the game, the lion, he seems simplistic. He has a lot of reactions in his deck where he will charge forward and drag anyone who's with him. So the first time you fight him, you're probably just gonna move up to his head and try to beat him up. Who cares, right? You'll very quickly learn that attacking him from dead on is not really the best idea, and it's a little bit safer to try to flank him. Unless, of course, you know that most of those reaction cards are already in his discard, in which case the question becomes, okay, I know those cards are there, so is it better for me to be in this position here? Or maybe I shouldn't attack him at all because every monster in the deck has a trap card. That's basically the, I gotcha, you get attacked. Or is it better to hold off because you're going to pop this trap card and, you know, basically screw whatever plan you had?
So I don't know if you played Shadows of Brimstone. It's actually one of my favorite games, and it's similar in that it has a campaign and you can adjust the difficulty. But in that game, there's definitely a power creep on the player's side.
Yeah.
Do you ever run into that here?
Absolutely.
Where the heroes are so powerful, it's just you're walking through all the monsters?
We had a playtester with just such terrible luck that he became terrified of all the higher level monsters in the game. So he would sort of like inch his way through the campaign, fighting low level monsters the whole time, taking what little rewards he could, and basically having no challenge. But the problem with that is they got to the final encounter and he just wiped. So that was sort of how we decided to deal with power creep, because the game is you have so much choice, you know? If you want to hunt a higher level monster, you can. If you want to stay on the lower level ones, you can too. So you can play it safe, which is, I guess, very typical of most sort of like people in the RPG sphere, especially people who are used to, you know, grinding the crap out of MMOs or RPGs. You just keep doing the safe thing over and over and over and over again. But the campaign is only so long, so it continues to march forward. So if you don't step up to the plate, not only will you not be ready, but you also won't see the content in the game.
So you keep explaining different emergent narratives that have come up as you've been playing and as your playtesters have played. Has that been the plan all along? I know that the rulebook is beefy and there's a lot of story in there. So do you want them to follow a story that you've prepared, or do you want that emergent narrative to be what they remember?
It's more about the emergent narrative, and that very much resonates with the miniatures, right? You know, you can read a mediocre novel and you enjoyed it like junk food, right? No problem. But people who are really into D&D will tell you about their characters, and they'll talk about these experiences they had as if they were real. And other people who've played D&D, they get that, you know? Even in Shadows of Brimstone, as you said, you can have an absolutely cracked out character, and other people who've played Shadows of Brimstone will know that and be excited to hear about it. So very much it's this sort of emergent gameplay that happens within the game that is the most important narrative, to me, at least. The things that happen in the the rule book, all the story events, I think there's 60 more? There's a lot of story events, are more about things that are happening to you guys as a group, happening to your settlement, or happening to individuals. So, for example, you hit, when a survivor hits 3 courage, they trigger a story event called Bolt. And they have sort of this like inner epiphany. And depending on what phase of the game you're in, showdown, settlement, or hunt, there's a little table that will modify and tell you what happens, right? So, you can imagine if you critically hit a monster and it gave you +1 courage, and the flavor text was something like, it roars defiantly and you fall back but gain +1 courage. And then you rolled on a little table and the table said you gained a fighting art. And you draw your fighting art and you gain, Mighty Strike, right? So this is just a series of events, but when you're excited about something, it paints a narrative in your head of what's happening. And the game supports that. That was something that was very important to us. During the fight, there's a tremendous amount of movement on the board. It's not rock'em sock'em robots at all. So it gives you a better feeling of, all right, the monster hit me, roll hit location die. He nailed me right in the chest. I just went skidding backwards. Next turn he roared and I, gained a disorder and flew into a bunch of violent seizures. When you tell people this, or even when you begin to imagine it as you play, the story is right there and it's happening in front of you and you're part of it, as opposed to, okay guys, we've reached chapter 3 of the game, let me pause and read to you a page or 2 of text, which is cool, but more often than not, you'll see a lot of people sort of check out because it's not related to them at the moment.
Yeah, they pick up their phone and...
Exactly, yeah. And that's cool. I love games like that too, but we wanted to sort of really keep putting the focus back on you and the things that are happening to you while you play.
Excellent. Originally, you chose Kickstarter as the path to produce the game. If you had to do it all over again, would you still choose Kickstarter?
Call it a blessing or a curse, but that is still the best option for people who want to get their game out there. There is nothing else wherein you can interface with your community directly or try to gain a new community in order to get funding for a product like this. If I pitched a $400 17-pound game to a publisher, it wouldn't happen. It's too high risk, But Kickstarter allowed me to sort of put that risk onto myself and then the people who were, ferociously interested in it, as opposed to a publisher guessing. So yeah, I would absolutely Kickstarter it again.
And for the people that did kickstart it, they can expect to start seeing it pretty soon, correct?
Yeah. It's very hard when you have to talk to a mass of people at once. And I found that as much as I want to just be completely brutally raw and honest to myself as I communicate with the backers, I have to sort of just speak in this language of facts and then add my genuine excitement to it. And that seems to resonate the best with them. So the honest truth is right now, the game is finally on the boat, and the time frame I was provided by my manufacturer is 2 to 6 weeks. And as soon as it hits our logistics partner's warehouse, they said another 1 week to 2 to process it. So that gives us 3 to 8, which doesn't sound super good, but considering we finished 2013, it is certainly close enough to taste it.
And for the people that didn't kickstart it and want to get their hands on this beast, how are they going to get there? How are they going to be able to buy it?
So we had pre-orders open for a little while when we finally announced that things were moving along. And we're taking pre-orders now during GenCon. We've also opened them back up on our website for the duration of GenCon. And the people who pre-order in this period are sort of lucky because they're going to be pushed out directly behind the backers. So it's almost like, one wave and then a second immediate wave. Following that, we'll probably wait until the holidays for a big retail push and hope that, this becomes a big attractive holiday item.
Are people going to be able to find this in their local game store, or are they going to have to come directly to you for it?
They're going to have to come directly to us for it. There are a couple local game stores that we've been speaking to that I would love to work with, but again, they see it as a very large item, and we need to find the right people who are comfortable with that and have communities that are into it before we can just sort of push it out. We currently have no major distributor or plans to have one. Granted, if someone came along and said, "Hi, Adam, I work for Target. We want to buy 20,000 copies of your game," I'd probably say, "Sure, let's do it." But, this is a niche within a niche for people who particularly appreciate something that's, very special.
So you said that the box weighs 17 pounds.
Yeah.
And it's obviously chock full of awesome miniatures. But I noticed those miniatures come on sprues.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for people that get the game who aren't necessarily familiar with building miniatures as a hobby?
So this is very much, you could classify it as a hobby game, and you will get as much out of it as you put into it. The one advantage of sprues, as opposed to pre-assembled models, is the quality that we can attain with these sort of precision milled plastic is extremely high. And the armor kit system in the game, as we call it, most monsters have their own sort of armor kit inspired from them. You can imagine the survivors in this world trying to take on the likeness of these monsters, and doing so by, as we do, dressing up like them or inspired by them, right? And the armor kits, each piece of armor and every weapon in the game is represented both on a little square gear card and as a physical model. So if you wanted to create a miniature that represented exactly what you had as a character, the game completely supports that. The advantage of being on sprues is that you can clip these pieces out and customize to a level that I don't think I've seen in any other games. It's definitely something that we're shooting for on a technical level, and I'm pretty proud of what we've achieved with it. So if people are looking to get the game in the future, they'll be able to get it directly from us at kingdomdeath.com. And right now, because you gentlemen have been so nice to us, we're opening pre-orders for the next 48 hours for any of your subscribers who might be interested in the game and might have missed out.
Thanks for spending the time to talk to us.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure.
Appreciate it. And for all those people lucky enough to watch this video within the next 48 hours, go out and get your hands on this game. It's awesome.